The house had never felt as cold as it did that night. The silence between us had stretched for days, thick with unspoken words and unaddressed tension. I could feel the weight of it in the air, pressing against my chest as I stood at the threshold of his study. I had tried to avoid this moment for so long, but I couldn't anymore. The lies, the secrets, everything was unraveling, and I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. Her voice echoed in my mind, soft but insistent. The words she had said earlier still lingered. You need to understand. I never meant for this to hurt you. But they didn't sound sincere. They sounded like an attempt to placate me, to make me feel small, to make me feel like the one at fault. I had spent years trying to believe the best in her, trying to believe that she was the woman he had chosen, the woman who was supposed to make our family whole again. But now, standing here, I saw her for what she really was, a constant, a shadow in my life. A reminder of everything that had been taken from me. I knocked, my hand trembling as I reached for the door. No answer came, but I didn't need one. I pushed the door open, stepping inside. The room was dim, the only light coming from the desk lamp that cast long shadows over the bookshelves. He was sitting behind his desk, buried in papers, the faint glow of the lamp reflecting off his glasses. He looked up when I entered, his face unreadable. Hazel, he said, his voice soft but cautious. What's the matter? Come in. I took a deep breath and stepped further into the room. The air felt heavy, charged with everything we had left unsaid. His gaze didn't leave me, but I could tell he was already preparing for the inevitable. I can't keep pretending anymore, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I need to know the truth. He shifted in his chair, his expression hardening, though his eyes still held a trace of concern. The truth about what? About her, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. About everything. About the life you've been hiding from me. He looked away for a moment, his gaze distant. And I knew then that I wasn't going to get the answer I wanted. Not the one I needed. But I had to hear it anyway. What are you talking about, Hazel? We've been over this before. No, I interrupted, stepping closer, my voice rising. We haven't. You've never told me the whole truth. You've kept me in the dark, made me believe things that weren't real. And I can't live like this anymore. He stood up then, the chair scraping against the wooden floor as he pushed it back. I've never lied to you, Hazel, he said, his voice strained. I've always done what I thought was best for you. But I could see the cracks in his façade. I could see the way he was avoiding my gaze. The way his hands shook as he reached for a glass on his desk. You've always been protecting her, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. You've always chosen her over me, and I've let it happen. I've let it happen because I didn't want to believe the truth. I could feel the anger rising in me, bubbling up, threatening to spill over. But now I know. I know the truth, and I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. His face softened, the hardness fading from his features, but the guilt in his eyes was clear. He took a step toward me, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. I never wanted to hurt you, Hazel. I thought I was protecting you from something you weren't ready to understand. But I was ready, I said, stepping back, the frustration welling up inside me. You kept me in the dark. You kept me away from the truth. And now I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't know who she is anymore. You've both lied to me for so long that I can't even trust my own thoughts. I turned to leave, the anger threatening to swallow me whole, but I couldn't take it anymore. I had spent too long hiding from the truth, from the pain of it all. As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. Hazel, please. I turned to look at him, my hand on the door handle, but I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. The truth had already been revealed. And no matter how much he tried to apologize or explain, it wouldn't change what had already happened. Her voice followed me, faint, as I left the room, echoing in my mind like a whisper in the dark. I couldn't tell if it was real or just a memory, but it didn't matter. The lies were broken now, and so was I. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had to leave it all behind. And for the first time, I knew that this was the end of something. The end of pretending. The end of being silent. And the beginning of something new. The house was quiet, but the silence was unbearable. It was the kind of silence that settled deep in your bones, like a weight that pressed against you, urging you to face things that you had been avoiding for far too long. I had tried to avoid this conversation, this confrontation, for weeks. But tonight, it felt like everything was pulling me toward it. Toward the truth that had been lurking just beneath the surface for far too long. I stood outside his study, my hand on the doorknob, but I hesitated. A part of me wanted to turn and walk away, to bury everything back inside where it wouldn't hurt as much. But I knew I couldn't. The lies had piled up too high, and the distance between us had grown too wide. I had to know the truth. I had to face it. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, just as it always was. He was sitting behind his desk, papers scattered in front of him, his posture stiff. His eyes focused on the documents in front of him. He didn't look up as I entered. He didn't even acknowledge me at first. But then, slowly, his gaze lifted. And I saw the flicker of something in his eyes, maybe concern. Maybe guilt, but there was something there. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hazel, he said, his voice soft but tired. What's wrong? I could feel the frustration building inside me, bubbling up and threatening to spill over. I had tried to hold it in for so long, tried to keep the peace. To keep pretending that everything was okay. But it wasn't. None of it was. And I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I need to know the truth, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. About everything. About you, about her, about why none of this ever felt real. He didn't say anything at first, his eyes flicking between me and the papers on his desk. As though he were trying to decide whether to face it or not. He knew what I meant. He knew what I was asking. I've always tried to protect you, he said finally, his voice low. From the things I've done. From the things that happened before you even came into the picture. I thought I was shielding you from it, from all the mess. Shielding me? I repeated, incredulous. You've been shielding me from the truth. You've been hiding things from me. And now, I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't know who she is. I don't know what's real. He looked away for a moment, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of my words were too much to bear. Hazel, you don't understand, he began, but I cut him off. The frustration finally breaking free. No, I do understand, I said, stepping closer to his desk. I understand that you've kept me in the dark, kept me on the outside. While she came into our lives and pretended to be something she's not. While you let her take my place in this family. And I understand that you've lied to me about all of it. His face hardened then, a flash of something defensive crossing his features. I never lied to you, he said, his voice sharp. I did what I thought was best for you, for us. For you, I shot back. Not for me. You've always done what was best for you. And now, you want me to believe that everything that's happened, everything that's been said, has been for my benefit? I'm not buying it anymore. There was a long silence, the kind of silence that sits heavy between two people who no longer understand each other. He stood up then, his hands shaking slightly as he placed them on the desk, his gaze fixed on me. I didn't want it to turn out like this, he said quietly. I didn't want you to feel like you were being replaced, like you didn't matter. But his words didn't reach me. They couldn't, not anymore. I didn't matter, I said, my voice breaking. That's the truth, isn't it? I was never important enough for you to tell me the truth. You chose her over me, over your own flesh and blood. And you think I'm just supposed to forgive you for that? He didn't respond. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The silence stretched between us, suffocating, until I could feel the weight of all the years. All the moments I had spent feeling invisible. All the times I had convinced myself that everything would be okay. But it wasn't okay. It had never been okay. I'm done, I said finally, my voice steady now, though my heart was breaking. I'm done pretending. I'm done living in a house built on lies and secrets. I can't stay here anymore. His face softened, but there was nothing he could say to stop me. Hazel, he said, his voice barely a whisper, please don't go. But I was already walking toward the door. I didn't look back. Not this time. I couldn't. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I knew I was leaving something behind. Something I would never get back. And as I stepped into the cold night, I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know where I was going or what I would find. But I knew one thing for sure, I was no longer bound by the lies. I was free. And that was enough. The house felt quieter than usual that night. The walls, which had once been full of life and conversation, now seemed to close in on me with every step I took. I had spent years pretending that everything was fine, pretending that the tension between us was just a phase, that the silence in our home was nothing more than the passing of time. But tonight, standing at the threshold of his study, I knew I could no longer ignore the truth. Her voice still echoed in my mind, haunting me. A constant reminder of everything I had tried to bury. Every word she had said to me, the calculated kindness, the half-hearted apologies, was now nothing but noise in my head. The woman who had come into our lives so effortlessly, so smoothly, had slowly replaced me. And I could feel it. I could feel it every time she smiled, every time she touched his arm. She was there, in everything, in every part of my life. I knocked on the door to his study, though I didn't need to. I didn't need permission anymore. Not when I had already made the decision to face what had been hidden for far too long. Come in, he said, his voice low, like he had been expecting me. But there was a hesitation there. A nervousness in his tone that only added to the tension in the air. I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, just as it always had been. Filled with the scent of old books and wood. He was sitting at his desk, papers scattered across the surface. His face weary and tired, as though he had spent the entire evening thinking about the very same thing that had been occupying my mind. When he saw me, his expression softened, but there was something else behind his eyes, guilt. Perhaps, or regret. Hayes, he said softly, using the nickname he had given me when I was a child. What's on your mind? I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of where to begin. But I couldn't hold back any longer. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, it was all too much. And it had been too much for too long. I need answers, I said, my voice steady but with an edge. I need to know what's been going on. I need to know what you've been hiding from me. His gaze flickered, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flash of something, fear? Before he quickly masked it with that same calm exterior. What do you mean? He asked, but the question didn't fool me. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I mean about her, I said, my words coming out sharp, like a knife cutting through the silence. About the way she's wormed her way into our lives and replaced me. About the way I've been made to feel invisible. I need to know why this is happening. Why you've let it happen. He sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair, as if the weight of my words was too much for him to bear. I've tried to protect you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for any of this to hurt you. I never wanted you to feel pushed aside, but you did, I interrupted, unable to stop myself. You let her take my place, you let her take everything that should have been mine. You never protected me. You protected her. His silence was deafening. I could see the way his jaw tightened. The way his eyes looked away from me, unable to meet my gaze. And for the first time, I realized how much he had allowed her to change everything. How much he had allowed her to change me. I didn't know how to fix it, he said, his voice strained. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I just let things settle down, everything would go back to normal. Normal? I repeated, the bitterness in my voice impossible to hide. There's nothing normal about this. There's nothing normal about a family built on lies and secrets. He stood up then, slowly, as if the movement itself pained him. Hazel, please. I'm trying to explain. You have no idea how difficult this has been. You think I've been ignoring you, but I've been doing what I thought was best. What I thought was right. I took a step forward, my anger rising. My voice shaking with the force of everything I had kept bottled up inside. What's right? I asked, my voice almost a whisper now, the pain raw in my chest. What's right about letting me be ignored, about letting me be pushed aside, while she takes everything that should have been mine? There was no answer. He couldn't answer me because he didn't have a good enough excuse. He didn't have an answer that would make it okay. I'm done pretending, I said, my voice breaking, but it didn't matter anymore. I'm done pretending that everything's fine. I'm done living in a house full of lies. His face fell, his eyes darkening with regret, but I didn't care. I couldn't care anymore. I need to go, I said, the finality of it settling in my stomach. I can't stay here. Not anymore. He reached out as if to stop me, but I stepped back, holding up a hand. No. Don't try to stop me. I've spent too many years letting you make decisions for me. Letting her make decisions for me. But not anymore. This is my life. And I'm taking control of it. I turned and walked toward the door, not looking back. I wouldn't. As I stepped out of the study, I could hear the faint sound of her voice in my head. The one that had followed me for so long, the one that had made me question myself for years. But tonight, I was done listening to her. I was done listening to anyone who didn't have my best interests at heart. And when I closed the door behind me, I knew it was the final time I would ever step foot in that house as the person I had been. I was ready to become the person I was meant to be. And that person didn't need to look back anymore. The house felt as though it had been holding its breath for weeks. Each room I passed seemed to whisper in its own way, but it was the study that called me. Like it always had in the past. The door, though ajar, seemed to resist me. As if aware that the confrontation I was about to have would tear apart the fragile peace that had held our home together for so long. I had been avoiding this moment for days, but the pressure was becoming too much. The silence in the halls, the glances exchanged in passing. The way her presence filled every corner of the house like an intrusive shadow, it was too much to bear. I needed answers. Not just from him, but from myself as well. I had been living in this fractured world for so long, walking on eggshells, pretending I could still belong when everything had already changed. I knocked once, my hand trembling, but there was no turning back now. I had to hear the truth, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew. "Come in," came his voice, gentle yet distant, as though he had already braced for what was coming. But nothing could have prepared either of us for what was about to be said. I pushed the door open, stepping into the familiar space that had once been a sanctuary. Now, it felt more like a cage, the walls closing in on me. He was sitting behind his desk, papers scattered in front of him. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. It was the same room I had entered countless times as a child. A place where I would sit and watch him, seeking approval or comfort. But tonight, I wasn't that child anymore. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice soft, almost too soft. I could hear the concern, but I also heard the distance. The kind of distance that had been growing between us for far too long. He had never been the father I needed him to be, and I had allowed myself to believe he was. "I need to know the truth," I said, standing still just inside the door, my eyes fixed on him. "I need to know why everything feels like a lie. Why it feels like I'm invisible in my own life." He looked up at me, his expression flickering between guilt and confusion. "Hazel, what are you talking about? What's going on?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I shot back, the words sharp with frustration. "You've let her take everything. You've let her take me." There was a long pause, and I could see him struggle to find words. The air between us thickened, charged with years of unspoken resentment. "I never wanted you to feel like that," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've always been important to me, but I didn't know how to make things right. You and she, it's complicated." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Complicated?" I repeated. "You think I haven't noticed? You think I don't see how you let her step into my place? Into a life that's supposed to be mine? And all the while, you tell me it's complicated?" His eyes softened, and I could tell he was trying to gather the right words. But nothing he said would undo the damage. "It's not like that. It's just, after everything that happened, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could protect you. But it was never about her, or about me. It was about trying to make something whole again." I stared at him, disbelief filling me. "You thought you were protecting me?" I took a step closer to his desk. "By letting me feel like I didn't belong? By letting me watch her slowly take my place in this family?" His face fell. "Hazel." "Don't," I interrupted, shaking my head. The tears I had been holding back threatening to spill. "Don't tell me you did what was best. You did what was easiest. And I was the one who paid for it." I stepped back, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. For so long, I had hoped for an explanation. For some kind of reassurance that the mess I had been living in wasn't my fault. But now I saw it for what it was, a series of choices he had made. Choices that had pushed me aside and allowed her to step in. And I couldn't pretend anymore. "I don't want to hear your excuses," I said, my voice steady but breaking. "I'm done. Done pretending everything's fine. Done pretending that I still have a place here. I don't. Not anymore." He stood up then, his chair scraping back as he moved toward me. "Hazel, please, you don't mean that. We can work through this. We can." "No," I cut him off, holding up my hand, my palm facing him. I've spent so many years trying to make this work, trying to make this family work. But it's too late now. You and she, I shook my head, my throat tight. You've both taken too much from me. And I can't keep fighting for a place I'll never have. I turned to leave, the tears finally spilling over, but I didn't let them stop me. As I reached the door, I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I knew that I had finally broken free. I was done being part of a life that wasn't mine. Done pretending that I had a place in a family that had always kept me on the outside. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long finally began to lift. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. And this time, I would find my own path. No more lies. No more pretending. It was time to start over. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, my back against the door of the study. The silence stretched out before me, thick and suffocating, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't sure where to go from here, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house. Not like this. Everything had changed. I had spent so many years pretending that the house was my home. That the family inside it was still whole, but the truth had settled in. And it had settled hard. The lies that had been buried beneath years of silence. The weight of things unsaid, they were finally out in the open. And I could no longer ignore them. I turned away from the study, my footsteps slow as I walked down the hall. But my mind was already racing. The house had never felt this empty, this hollow, before. Each room, each familiar space felt like a prison now. Filled with ghosts of a life I had outgrown. The walls, which once felt like a safe haven, now felt like barriers between me and the person I was becoming. As I passed through the living room, I thought about all the times I had stood there. Watching them, seeing the way they interacted with each other, how she had always found ways to make her presence known, how my father had always seemed to choose her over me. I had been invisible in my own home, and tonight, I had seen it clearly. But it wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about the way she had come into our lives and changed everything. It was about him. It was about the way he had let it all happen. Let her take my place in a world I thought was mine. I stepped outside into the cool night air, feeling the weight of everything I had left behind. The stars overhead were barely visible through the dim glow of streetlights. But I didn't need them to see the path ahead. It was dark, uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it was mine to walk. I didn't look back. I couldn't. There was no going back to what had been. No going back to the family I had tried so hard to hold together. I had done everything I could to make them see me. To make them understand that I was still here, still part of their world. But they hadn't seen it. They hadn't seen me. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what the future held, or if I even had a place in it anymore. But I knew one thing: I was done being silenced. I was done pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was done trying to fit into a world that didn't have space for me. The road ahead felt uncertain, like stepping into an unknown future. But it didn't scare me. Not anymore. I had the rest of my life ahead of me, and this time, it was going to be on my terms.